Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Kisaraniko from Instructional Design class TBE of number 4, and today our group will be present about determining the success of the instructional design product and process. Sustained and varied evaluation is a crucial element of the instructional design process. Evaluation provides information that allows decisions to be made about learners, instruction, and the ID process. And based on the type of evaluation commonly used by instructional designers, there are three types of evaluation: the first formative, and the second summative, and the last learner evaluations. The first formative, it's concentrate of the instructional design process, and the second summative, the instruction developed as a result of the process, and the last learner evaluation. A major purpose of evaluation is to help determine how successful a learner has been as a result of participating in instruction. Okay, now let's discuss more about formative evaluation. Formative evaluation is used throughout the instructional design process to gather data that can be used to provide feedback on how the process is going. It is especially useful during the early stages of the instructional design process, and the feedback allows an instructional designer to make improvements to the instruction before it is completely developed. This helps ensure that high quality instruction is developed. In addition to helping improve the instruction, data gathered through formative evaluation can be shared with a client to indicate how the project is progressing. Periodic communication with your client about how the project is progressing helps make certain that project's goals and expectations will be met. Okay, the next material is about approaches to formative evaluation. Smith and Ragan 2004 write the formative evaluation is conducted to determine the weakness in instructions so that revision can be made to make them more effective and efficient. This helps an instructional designer know whether the instructional materials are there yet or whether she needs to continue the design process. And Smith and Ragan provide a four-step approach to formative evaluation. The first, design reviews, and then expert reviews, learner validation, and the last, ongoing evaluation. Okay, first, the design review. Design review are conducted after various phases of the instructional design process, such as the need analysis, task analysis, goals and objective analysis, and learner analysis. And then design reviews help to verify the accuracy of information at each stage of the instructional design process before instruction is developed. And Smith and Ragan advocate revisiting the data gathered during this instructional design phases to determine how accurate they are. And the second, the expert review. Expert reviews are conducted to gather information about the instruction to determine if it is accurate and current. Various experts such as content experts, instructional design experts, pedagogical experts, and experts on the learners can be used to provide various perspectives on the instructions. The instruction provided for experts review is typically at the draft stage. Smith and Ragan suggest that experts reviewer comments should be divided into three categories. The first, revision that need to be made immediately, and then suggested revision that require additional data can be gathered during the final two stages of the formative evaluation, and the last, suggested revision that should be ignored. Okay, the third, learner validation. Learner validation, according Dick et al. 2011, advocate three basic paths of formative evaluation. The first, one-on-one or clinical, second, small group, and the third, field trial, and the last, ongoing evaluation. Ongoing evaluation includes gathering data on the long-term effectiveness of instruction. Smith and Ragan state that if instruction is meant to be used multiple times, then provisions need to be made in a formative evaluation plan to collect effectiveness data. These data, which are similar to data collected during a field trial, provide feedback on what revision needed to be made to instruction based on its actual use and whether the revisions made have been effective. And then Morrison et al. 2017 recommends schoolers each-step process: the first purpose, audience, issues, resources, evidence, data gathering techniques, analysis, and reporting. But for more explanation, it will be presented by the next presenter.
The first step, determining the purpose or objective of the evaluation, is carried out accordingly consulting with clients. The, the two most common goals are to improve the instruction under development and to meet your client administrative requirement work. Most state agencies are required to include an evaluation component to help ensure that project objectives are met and to report on how money has been spent. 2. The evaluation audience is important to determine because it will prompt the type of information that needs to collect it and report it. The client will be able to help determine who to intended audience is. It is best to try to narrow the audience as much as possible. After determining the purpose of the evaluation and the intent audience, it is time to determine the problem that needs to be addressed. For example, in the case of an interactive instructional kiosk, did the student successfully use the kiosk after completing the instruction? What elements of the kiosk did student find the easiest to understand and the least understandable? The final step in this phase to identify the type of evidence that are needed to satisfy the evaluation issues. For example, during planning phase of the formative evaluation of a nurse training program, the instructional designer determined that all participants will have specific skills that are evaluated using hospital patients. Phase 2, conducting the evaluation, includes determining the data collection techniques that will be used gathering the data and analyzing the data. Step 7, analyzing the data should replace the objectives of the formative evaluation to provide useful information that help instructional designer improve instructions. Complex statistical analysis is usually not required. Morrison et al. 2007 recommend the following typical analytical procedure: frequency distribution, frequency graph or histogram, descriptive statistics such as percentage, average, and medians, and last, list of actual comments made by respondents. Typical evaluation report formatted in the following way: executive summary and abstract outlining the main findings, conclusion, and recommendation. 2. Objectives of evaluation. Evaluation problem, state as a question. Description of the instruction being evaluated. 3. Methodology used. Participant, instruments used to collect data. 4. Result, analysis, and findings. The emphasis in informative evaluation is on collecting and data analysis is repetition of instruction, page 258. They provide three basic phase formative evaluation: 1. One-on-one or clinical. 2. Small groups. 3. Field trials. It is important to note that this type of formative evaluation by Dick et al. Advocate is designed for work specifically with safe teaching materials. Instructional designer must be actively involved during this phase. After selecting the learners who will participate in the one-on-one evaluation. The steps for this phase are: explain to students that you want his reaction to new instructional materials that have been developed. 2. Give a pretest to the contents. 3. Encourage the learner to talk about the material as he or she follows instruction, and be candid about what he likes or doesn't like, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. 4. Give a post-test. Discuss the result with the student by asking him to explain responses made. And last, record the time it took the student to follow instruction. Okay. For this phase, a student or more must be selected, which is a representative sample of the entire target group students. After selecting students who will participate in the small group evaluation, the steps for this phase are: 1. Explain to student group that you would like reaction to new instructional material have been developed. You want them to work on their own material to the best of their ability. 2. Carry out instruction as they were intended to be used in their final forms. Give an initial test if it is part of the instructions. And 3. Observe what happens without involvement unless the learner cannot continue instruction. Note students' difficulties in completing instruction. And 4. Do a post-test after the instructions are finished. 5. Manage attitude questionnaires. And last, the breed group of students. Okay. For this phase are similar to small group evaluation. The main difference is that an instructor, not an instructional designer, must administer the instructions. The role of the instructional designer is to observe and record what is happening. Okay, and last, designing and conducting formative evaluation. The approach to the formative evaluation of an instructional designer will be dictated by the scope of the identified project. It may not be feasible for every ID project to perform a complete formative evaluation using one of the 3 approaches described in these chapters.
Summative evaluation. As part of the instructional design process, summative evaluation takes place after an instructional interpretation has been implemented. The major goal of summative evaluation is to gather that data that allow for its effectiveness to be determined. Did the instruction bring about the desired change? Were the goals of the client met? These are 2 major questions that summative evaluation helps to answer. The results of a summative evaluation are described in a formal report outlining the impact of the instructional interpretation. The evaluation report will typically outline who participated in the instructional interpretation, what activities impacted them, and what changes occurred from their participation. The evaluation report will often include the costs and benefits of implementation, descriptions of the essential conditions necessary to continue the program or reproduce it, and recommendation on whether the instructional interpretation should be modified, discontinued, or continued as is.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ridwan Hidayat and I will explain about approaches to summative evaluation. For the beginning instructional designer, summative evaluation can be a daunting task, and it is a complex process that takes a great deal of skill and experience to successfully carry out. There are evaluation experts whose sole professional activity is to conduct summative evaluation, and they are typically referred to as program evaluators. Program evaluators use various approaches to conduct a summative evaluation. In program evaluation, alternative approaches and practical guidelines (in parentheses for addition) Fitzpatrick Sanders and Wharton in 2004 described 6 such approaches. In parentheses, see figure 10.1. It is beyond the scope of this book to describe the intricacies of these approaches and how to become a program evaluator. If you wish to learn more about summative evaluation than what is presented in this chapter, we suggest that you start by reading their book and by taking a course on program evaluation. The knowledge and skill gained as a result will certainly help you as an instructional designer. And the next is we focus our discussion of summative evaluation on 4 different approaches that instructional design experts advocate. The purpose is to introduce how summative evaluation is approached in instructional design. It is not to make you an expert. One of the most cited approaches to summative evaluation in ID is Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation. And the four levels of his model are: number 1 is reaction, and number 2 learning, number 3 transfer, and number 4 results. According to Kirkpatrick in 1994, evaluation should always begin with level 1 and then progress through the remaining level as time and the budget.
Designing and conducting a summative evaluation. In an ideal situation, the instructional designer would be directly involved in designing the summative evaluation, but would not be responsible for conducting it. The evaluation would be conducted by an evaluator outside of the organization that contracted the ID project. Having the instructional designer responsible for designing and conducting the summative evaluation is often seen as a conflict of interest because the instructional designer is busy and has a tremendous stake in the project's success. However, this is not to imply that an instructional designer cannot be involved. It only complicates the situation. As we mentioned, conducting a successful summative evaluation is a complex process that takes a great deal of skill and experience. If at all possible, we advise that beginning instructional designers do not take on the role of primary evaluator for a summative evaluation. However, the reality is that as an instructional designer, you will be required to conduct a summative evaluation. If this is the case, it is important to plan for a summative evaluation at the beginning stages of an ID project. Discuss with the client what the expectations are for the summative evaluation. Especially important to discuss are the summative evaluation goals. Although this may change once the summative evaluation is formally developed, the goals will help an instructional designer know what the client expectations are for the ID project. In addition, planning in advance will allow for data to be gathered through the formative evaluation that can be used in the summative evaluation. The evaluation goals will dictate the remaining steps that are to be taken in the summative evaluation. A process such as the one advocated by Smith and Regan can be used as a guiding model for a beginning instructional designer. As with successful ID projects, continual and consistent communication with the client is a key element in determining the level of success an instructional designer will have in conducting a summative evaluation. Group processing, evaluating the instructional design team. Johnson and Holovic, 1998, have written much about group processing. Although their work focuses on teams in a classroom environment, what they have written is appropriate for instructional design teams. We have often used group processing in the instructional design projects we have worked on. It has allowed us to form positive working relationship within our teams. According to Johnson et al. 1998, group processing helps improve the quality of how the team approaches tasks, increasing individual accountability of team members by focusing attention on the tasks a team member must complete. The team to learn from each other by spending time discussing the tasks individuals are completing, eliminating problems that may be occurring. Group processing is a time when team members can share information. For different parts of processing should be included feedback, reflection, goal, improvement, and celebration. Feedback should be given to team members about how well they are completing their tasks and how well the team is working together. Team members should then have time to reflect on the feedback they have received. If improvement needs to be made on how the team is working together, then the team should discuss ways to improve and come up with a plan of action. Additionally, the team members should help each other and set goals for improving the quality of their work. Finally, the team should celebrate the hard work of the team members and team success. Product and process evaluation and the instructional design process. Determining the success of the instructional design, product, and process is significant task that can help lead to an improved ID product and process. Although there are various approaches to conducting an evaluation, the questions an instructional designer will need to answer before beginning an evaluation are the same. These are: what is the goal of the evaluation? Who is asking for the evaluation? What type of evaluation is needed? When does the evaluation need to take place? What are the questions that need to be answered? What types of data need to be gathered? Do the data currently exist? What instruments are needed to gather the data? How will the data be gathered? How will the data be analyzed? How will the data be reported? Okay, this is the end of our presentation. Sorry for any mistakes. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.